Chapter 12. Heart Preparation Necessary. For nothing reaches the heart but what is from the heart, or pierces the conscience but what comes from a living conscience. That quote is from William Penn. In the morning was more engaged in preparing the head than the heart. This has been frequently my error, and I have always felt the evil of it, especially in prayer. Reform it then, O Lord, enlarge my heart, and I shall preach. That quote is from Robert Murray McChaney. A sermon that has more head infused into it than heart will not borne home with efficacy to the hearers. That quote is from Richard Cecil. Prayer, with its manifold and many-sided forces, helps the mouth to utter the truth in its fullness and freedom. The preacher is to be prayed for. The preacher is made by prayer. The preacher's mouth is to be prayed for. His mouth is to be opened and filled by prayer. A holy mouth is made for praying, by much praying. A brave mouth is made by praying, by much praying. The church and the world, God and heaven, owe much to Paul's mouth. Paul's mouth owed its power to prayer. How manifold, illimitable, valuable, and helpful prayer is to the preacher in so many ways, at so many points and in every way. One great value is it helps his heart. Praying makes the preacher into a heart preacher. Prayer puts the preacher's heart into the preacher's sermon. Prayer puts the preacher's sermon into the preacher's heart. The heart makes the preacher. Men of great hearts are great preachers. Men of bad hearts may do a measure of good, but this is rare. The hireling and the stranger may help the sheep at some point, but it is the good shepherd with the good shepherd's heart who will bless the sheep and answer the full measure of the shepherd's place. We have emphasized sermon preparation until we have lost sight of the important thing to be prepared, the heart. A prepared heart is much better than a prepared sermon. A prepared heart will make a prepared sermon. Volumes have been written laying down the mechanics and taste of sermon making until we become possessed with the idea that this scaffolding is the building. The young preacher has been taught to lay out all his strength on the form, taste, and beauty of his sermon as a mechanical and intellectual product. We have thereby cultivated a vicious taste among the people and raised the clamour for talent instead of grace, eloquence instead of piety, rhetoric instead of revelation, reputation and brilliancy instead of holiness. By it we have lost the true idea of preaching, lost preaching power, lost pungent conviction for sin, lost the rich experience and elevated Christian character, lost the authority over consciences and lives which always results from genuine preaching. It would not do to say that preachers study too much. Some of them do not study at all, others do not study enough. Numbers do not study the right way to show themselves workmen, approved of God, but our great lack is not in head culture, but in heart culture. Not lack of knowledge, but lack of holiness is our sad and telling defect. Not that we know too much, but that we do not meditate on God and His Word and what and fast and pray enough. The heart is the great hindrance to our preaching. Words pregnant with divine truth find in our hearts non-conductors. Arrested, they fall shorn and powerless. Can ambition, that lusts after praise and plays, preach the gospel of him who made himself of no reputation and took on him the form of a servant? Can the proud, the vain, the egotistical preach the gospel of him who was meek and lowly? Can the bad-tempered, passionate, selfish, hard, worldly man preach the system which teems with long-suffering, self-denial, tenderness, which imperatively demands separation from enmity and crucifixion to the world? Can the hireling official, heartless, perfunctory, preach the gospel which demands the shepherd to give his life for the sheep? Can the covetous man, who counts salary and money, preach the gospel till he has gleaned his heart and can say in the spirit of Christ and Paul, in the words of Wesley, I count it dung and dross, I trample it under my feet, yet not I, but the grace of God in me, esteem it just as the mire of the streets, I desire it not, I seek it not. God's revelation does not need the light of human genius, the polish and strength of human culture, the brilliancy of human thought, or the force of human brains to adorn it or enforce it. But it does demand the simplicity, the docility, humility, and faith of a child's heart. It was this surrender and subordination of intellect and genius to the divine and spiritual forces which made Paul peerless among the apostles. It was this which gave Wesley his power and radicated his labours in the history of humanity. This gave to Loyola the strength to arrest the retreating forces of Catholicism. Our great need is heart preparation. Luther held it as an axiom. He who has prayed well, who has studied well. We do not say that men are not to think and use their intellect, but he will use his intellect best who cultivates his heart most. We do not say that preachers should not be students, but we do say that the great study should be the Bible, and he studies the Bible best who has kept his heart with diligence. We do not say that the preacher should not know men, but he will be a greater adept in human nature who has fathomed the depths and intricacies of his own heart. We do not say that while the channel of preaching is the mind, its fountain is the heart, you may broaden and deepen the channel, but if you do not look well to the purity and depth of the fountain, you will have a dry or polluted channel. We do say that almost any man of common intelligence has sense enough to preach the gospel, but very few have grace enough to do so. We do say that he who has struggled with his own heart and conquered it, who has taught it humility, faith, love, truth, mercy, sympathy, courage, who can pour the rich treasures of the heart thus trained through a manly intellect, all surcharged with the power of the gospel, on the conscience of his hearers, such a one will be the truest, most successful preacher in the esteem of his Lord. Chapter 13. Grace from the heart rather than the head. Study not to be a fine preacher. Jerichos are blown down with ram's horns. Look simply unto Jesus for preaching food, and what is wanted will be given, and what is given will be blessed, whether it be a barley grain or a wheaten loaf, a crust or a crumb. Your mouth will be a flowing stream, or a fountain sealed according as your heart is. Avoid all controversy in preaching, talking, writing. Preach nothing down but the devil, and nothing up but Jesus Christ. That quote is from Berridge. The heart is the saviour of the world. Heads do not save. Genius, brains, brilliancy, strength, natural gifts do not save. The gospel flows through hearts. All the mightiest forces are heart forces. All the sweetest and loveliest graces are heart graces. Great hearts make great characters. Great hearts make divine characters. God is love. There is nothing greater than love, nothing greater than God. Hearts make heaven. Heaven is love. There is nothing higher, nothing sweeter than heaven. It is the heart and not the head which makes God's great preachers. The heart counts much in every way in religion. The heart must speak from the pulpit. The heart must hear in the pew. In fact, we serve God with our hearts. Head homage does not pass current in heaven. We believe that one of the serious and most popular errors of the modern pulpit is the putting off more thought than prayer, of more head than of heart in sermons. Big hearts make big preachers. Good hearts make good preachers. A theological school to enlarge and cultivate the heart is the golden desideratum of the gospel. The pastor binds his people to him and rules his people by his heart. Yes, they may admire his gifts, they may be proud of his ability, they may be affected for the time by his sermons, but the stronghold of his power is his heart. His sceptre is love, the throne of his power is his heart. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. Heads never make martyrs. It is the heart which surrenders the life to love and fidelity. It takes great courage to be a faithful pastor, but the heart alone can supply this courage. Gifts and genius may be brave, but it is the gifts and geniuses of the heart and not of the head. It is easier to fill the head than it is to prepare the heart. It is easier to make a brain sermon than a heart sermon. It was heart that drew the Son of God from heaven. It is heart that will draw men to heaven. Men of heart is what the world needs to symbolize with its woe, to kiss away its sorrows, to compassionate its misery and to alleviate its pain. Christ was eminently the man of sorrows because he was preeminently the man of heart. Give me thy heart is God's requisition of men. Give me thy heart is man's demand of man. A professional ministry is a heartless ministry. When salary plays a great part in the ministry, the heart plays little part. We may make preaching our business and not put our hearts into the business. He who puts self to the front of his preaching puts heart to the rear. He who does not sow with his heart in his study will never reap a harvest for God. The closet is the heart's study. We will learn more about how to preach and what to preach there than we can learn in our libraries. Jesus wept is the shortest and biggest verse in the Bible. It is he who goes forth weeping, not preaching great sermons, bearing precious seeds, who shall come again rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. Praying gives sense, brings freedom, wisdom, broadens and strengthens the mind. The closet is a perfect school teacher and schoolhouse for the preacher. Thought is not only brightened and clarified in prayer, but thought is born in prayer. We can learn more in an hour praying, when praying indeed, than for many hours in the study. Books are in the closet which can be found and read nowhere else. Revelations are made in the closet which are made nowhere else.